Hi and welcome to Mavericks Radio. I'm your host Chris Roy and this is the place to be to become your best self, do work you love and live life on your terms. On this podcast we speak to Mavericks who inspire us, people who play to their strengths, follow the heart and do their best to create positive impact. We aim to get the insight and wisdom from their story to give you the clarity, courage and confidence to carve your own path through life. This week I speak to Justin Billingsley, the CEO of Publicis Group DACH and CEO for Publicis EMIL, the global network agency for Mercedes-Benz. When I met Justin, I really wasn't prepared for just how down-to-earth and grounded he really is. He might be a big cheese, but he doesn't act that way, and I was really struck by how truly thoughtful and insightful he is. In this interview, he gives us a hint at what he's reading right now.
I'm reading a book on flavour, and if you looked at the stack of books beside my bed, you'd find there 80% weird non-fiction topics like that.
And he shares how he thinks we should prepare for the future.
I've got a bunch of 12-year-old boys for whom I need to give them the ability to critically solve problems, to be creative in the way they work, because the actual things they know won't be as relevant.
So hi Mavericks, welcome to the Mavericks Unlimited podcast. Today we have got a very, very special guest. We've got a friend of mine and Hass's, Mr. Justin Billingsley. Hi Justin, how you doing?
I'm fantastic today.
Good to see you, and I understand you've been in 5 countries this week.
Only in continental Europe this week. So this week was a Switzerland, Germany, France, Italy week, so not too bad.
Very good, very good. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I today have, I do 3 jobs. I work in the Publicis Group, which is the 3rd largest advertising and communications and consultancy company in the world. For the group, I run all of our operations in Germany, Switzerland and Austria as CEO of DACH. I am also the global COO, operating officer for all of our creative design and influence agencies, like the one we're sitting in now, Saatchi & Saatchi here in London. And lastly, and probably most excitingly, most recently, I'm also the global leader on all the work we do for Daimler, the Mercedes-Benz business. So it's a new business we won earlier this year, and what's really exciting about it is that my job is to build an entirely new agency model for them from scratch, and in doing so disrupt the rest of the company, and that's really my job. I'm the chief disruption officer in that respect, so that's what they pay me to do.
Brilliant. And for the listeners, I mean, guys, you might be thinking, why are we talking to like a big corporate cheese? Well, Justin is the definition of a maverick as far as we can see. So what does the word maverick mean to you?
I think about a maverick as a positive disruptor, as someone who tries to do the right thing and doesn't necessarily pay attention to the norms and expectations and rules in pursuing that right thing. And doing the right thing is more important to them than following those expectations and rules. So they're the people that change things.
So tell us how that applies to you. I mean,
well, it's interesting you say that I'm a big cheese. I don't think people's natural gravity point for a maverick means they have to be an entrepreneur, or they've done a startup, or they've written a book, or they're on stage at TED. I mean, I think that I've only ever worked in big companies. I think the smallest company I've ever worked with is this one. About 84,000 employees. Every other company has been even bigger than this.
Crazy.
Yet for 20 whatever years, I've managed to be, I think, positively disruptive in those big environments. And if those environments don't attract people like me, they simply won't survive. So that Publicis can hire me in different jobs 10 years ago, we might talk about them later, and my brief being, please come in and build the agency you always wanted when you were a client. They're inviting me to drive change. I may not fit the obvious mold of being a maverick because I haven't gone out to do my own thing, but I've always felt like I've been running my own startup inside the safe and well-funded environment of big companies.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? Being a maverick is a mindset. It's not about a position or anything like that. So, I mean, what is it? You know, in big organizations, it can take a degree of bravery or a degree of courage to like really be the disruptor. So what drives you?
I like solving problems. When I worked just for Saatchi & Saatchi, we would do this exercise with our then boss, Kevin Roberts, who would help us work out what our, as leaders, one-word equity was. What's the one thing that makes you different, better, special? And of course, the natural point that people try to get to are things like, I'm the captain, or I'm the gemologist, or these wonderful fluffy things. And I quite proudly earned, and still today have, the nickname of being the plumber.
Love that.
My job is to connect things. My job is to find flow. And I don't mind getting covered in shit while I'm doing it, because sometimes that's the price to pay to be a plumber.
Right.
And when you need a plumber urgently, you get paid a lot of money. So I'm quite proudly the plumber. And getting involved, being there live, being engaged, being authentic, and not solving the problems from the corner office, but with the team, I think is what has marked what we have managed to achieve so far, and that's the way I intend to continue to work.
Love that. And there's also something there about getting unstuck, isn't there? Sitting here opposite you, you're quite different to how I kind of built up this picture in my mind of, not suited and booted, but to see you here in your Stormtrooper t-shirt and a pair of jeans is just brilliant. And just to let you know, guys, we're actually sat here with our shoes off because this is the way that Justin rolls.
I don't wear shoes. It's funny, I was in my Berlin office on Friday, and I was running late and I had to get into a car to get to the airport. I couldn't find my shoes anywhere because I kick them off under whatever desk I start my day in, and I have to look at my diary to see where my shoes still are at the end of the day. So I'll have to remember they're in the corner of this room as I get to the end of this day.
At least when you go out the room, you'll go past them. So if you could just summarise for us kind of your journey so far, as it were, kind of up to this kind of...
Sure. I'm Australian, in case people can't tell yet with the accent. I left 20 years ago, so it's a bit dulled. I've always been a marketer. I don't know how the 17-year-old me chose marketing. In Australia, unlike in the UK or even in the US, tertiary study is very much a vocational choice. Mm-hmm. It's quite scary as I think about it now that the 17-year-old me chose to study marketing. It was a fluke. It turned out I was quite good at it. It turns out I was quite interested in it, which is helpful to be in the middle of that Venn diagram.
Absolutely.
I worked for Unilever for a bunch of years in Australia as a management trainee, and then what I really needed to do, like all Australians, is to get out. I mean, everyone wants to get out, whether it's for 6 weeks or 60 years. We all get out. We all supposedly also eventually go home. We'll see what happens. Unilever was scaling back on their expat scheme at the time, so Coke offered me a job, Coca-Cola company. I went to them and they said, we guarantee within 2 years we'll send you overseas. Great, fantastic, I'm off. And 6 months in, they offered me my first job, which was in, of all places, New Zealand. the only place further from the world than I was already in.
Could have been Vanuatu or something.
It could have been. It would probably still be there if it was.
Yeah.
So I went to New Zealand for a while, and that started a decade-long journey with Coke in different parts of the world, in Asia, in the US, here in the UK. I went from Coke to a global marketing role at Nokia the year that iPhone launched. That was an interesting year to observe that company.
Yeah, that must have been crazy.
From Nokia, I went to Orange, which at the time was one of the most loved and respected brands in the UK. Sadly, no longer on the high street, but it was a wonderful time to work for such a brand-centric organisation. And it was from Orange that I was attracted from being a client. So those were all marketing jobs, running brands, running campaigns, solving marketing problems, to switch to agency side about 10 years ago. And it was Saatchi, and Saatchi said, Justin, instead of moving your family around the world or changing companies to solve new marketing problems, if you're in an agency, the diversity of those problems comes to you. And which I hadn't considered in that way before. And so I moved to China to run Saatchi and Saatchi in China, which was also the most challenging thing I ever did. I was there for 4.5 years. I came back to Europe to work here for Saatchi in Europe, then globally. And then, as is happening in our industry, a lot of consolidation and putting things together. And in those consolidations, I've moved to be responsible for different parts of our group to where I am now. But so I'm just about to clock up a decade with Publicis. And in that time, I've been blessed with working on some of the most diverse client problems, from cars to nappies to vaccines, and been in some of the most interesting parts of the world doing it. So I can't imagine doing something else, which is a nice feeling. But I also can't really imagine what I'll be doing in 2 years, which is also a nice feeling. Amazing. So as long as I can keep those two things, then it's a good place to be. I
just want to jump back to China because that sounds really interesting. And obviously the Chinese market is huge these days. What was it like being in China at that time?
I miss it. I miss the optimism. I miss the energy. I miss the smell. I was back there a couple of weeks ago, and I get re-energized every time I go.
Where were you in?
In Shanghai.
In Shanghai.
In proper Shanghai. So it was wonderful. I mean, I look back with pride of my time there. I also look back with a bit of a shudder, to be honest, because it was a dangerous decision that I took to go there. I mean, I like to challenge myself with what's the next learning curve, how am I going to stretch, what's new about this. But in going from being a client, a marketer at Orange in the UK in a constrained, safe environment, creatively challenging, to going to China, where I knew very little about the culture, I knew none of the language. So my first time in China, my first time running an advertising agency.
Yeah.
And worse than that, probably my first time running an advertising agency like Saatchi, which compared to all the other advertising agencies is one that's much more driven by strength of personality and had a very strong culture. And frankly, I was one of the most senior external appointments. It wasn't an agency at the time that brought in talent from outside. Right. So it tended to reject transplanted organs because you weren't part of you hadn't grown up with them kind of thing. So it was 3 big curves, which frankly, as I look back now, really shouldn't have worked, and almost didn't.
Really?
About 9 months. So there's lots of stats about expats in China. You're either there for 9 months or you're there for 4 or 5 years. There's not much in between. The burnout rate is massive. The marriage failure rate, if you go there with a partner, is phenomenal. There's a lot of externalities that affect your ability to do well, and whether it is the cultural barriers, whether it is just the nature of selling and relationship building is just fundamentally different to everything that I'd previously learned. And I got quite sick after about 6 to 9 months there, just from overwork and stress. And it was actually, I had an ulcer, and it was actually one of the other agency leaders in the group who was there running Leo Burnett, a guy named Michael Wood, who's still with us today, he runs all our P&G business, who came and saw me and said, listen, Justin, the decision's really simple. You've either got to decide which one is easier, changing China or changing yourself. And it made me go through a period of working out again what my strengths were, and that one of the thing that was withholding me from doing well up until that point, and then doing well in China, and actually since in agency world, was something that a new muscle I had to build, which was embracing ambiguity. Yeah, I'd spent 20 years being Unilever, Coke, trained on a lack of ambiguity, the presence of facts, the presence of resources, the clarity of capability, getting things done. But in our job, I can plan about half my week next week, and tomorrow morning I'll wake up and there'll be some problem that needs solving. And not being worried about that ambiguity, but embracing it and then using it like judo, using the strength of the ambiguity to your advantage, to be the person that can swim in ambiguous circumstances better than anyone else, becomes a new skill that's needed. It's no point being smart. There's no point working hard if you can't. And when I look at the failure of people in our particular industry, I think it very often comes down to that you can't be satisfied not knowing exactly who you report to, not knowing exactly what your job is, just doing the best right thing at a point in time. And so that was a muscle I learned quickly in China, and we took Saatchi within 2 years to be Agency of the Year 2 years in a row, about 3 years after I'd been there.
Amazing.
And it was they were my best and worst days.
Right.
And that's probably why I miss them. That's probably a big reason why I miss it.
So I want to dive into something right there. So I don't have any experience of China personally, but I'm from India, or been half Indian and all that kind of stuff, and the Asian cultures are quite crazy. Let's face it. So I get the ambiguity and the fast pace and all that kind of thing. But how did that muscle you're talking about embracing ambiguity? That's easier said than done. So how did it work for you? What did you do to flex that muscle?
It was really about it was about recalibrating myself in that things aren't black and white.
Right.
So in China, you hear the phrases that negotiation starts after the contract is signed, and these things that seem like these eternal truths, they are true. There are aspects of relationship building that I simply had to reprioritize dinners and karaoke and lunch and breakfast over working in meetings and presentations and PowerPoint, and that things would take time, and I had to be more patient, and I had to be more choiceful and prioritize, and I had to bring people with me. I had an extra complicating factor, and that was I had quite a bit of friendly fire as well, because the one of the reasons an external was sent to China was, as is commonplace, that there were some integrity challenges in the business. And so working out what they were and the root cause of those things and removing them was an early big challenge, which doesn't make you many friends inside. So so then getting those connections, finding that team, and I'm very happy to say that, so I left 5 years ago, and almost all of my leadership team are the leaders of that agency there today. Which is I'm really proud of.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool. What was the biggest takeaway from China?
Biggest takeaway from China is that the 20th century was an aberration, and China is indeed the Middle Kingdom. My kids all speak Mandarin. We have a tutor that comes to our house every Sunday since we've been back in China.
Really?
That helps them with their Mandarin. And language is simply one thing, but it's one of those things that makes it an impenetrable place. So if they can help with them, that's good. But what we're seeing is them falling back to their normal place. 13 out of the last 14 centuries, they were the largest economy in the world. It was the last century that was the aberration. They're simply going back to where they belong. All of the fundamental inventions that we rely upon trace their roots back to both Chinese and Middle Eastern invention.
Right.
And I have a deep respect for the place, and I look forward to heading back one day in some capacity.
So let's bring it forward to like today's challenges and all that kind of stuff. What for you? I mean, we're in the age of the industry is changing. We're in the age of digital and all that kind of stuff. What for you are like the biggest challenges in kind of digital leadership, as it were, and what's most important in the age of digital leadership?
It's funny because my wife asked me why I travel so much, given that we've got all this wonderful technology. Why aren't you just video conferencing? I'm on the road 80% of the time. I'm somewhere else. Because despite all of this technology, the only way to tell the health of a client relationship or the health of an agency is to walk into it and smell it. You cannot tell all of these things down phone lines, down video lines. I actually can't see the technology progressing to a point that you can have what they say in Germany, a four eyes conversation with someone to really assess where we are. And the you can smell victory in an agency. It's not in the P&L. You can hear the buzz when ideas are brewing, and you can smell despair when something's wrong. And you can't see that in any of the normal reporting. So I get out there as much as I can. So I'm actually relatively low tech. I'm a list maker. I'm a drawer. I've tried to. My adoption of technology for things is quite high, and I've tried productivity apps and Todoist and Evernote and things like that, and I still use them in various capacities. But I still have a discipline of writing today's actions last night and then going to sleep and having some of them already done when I was sleeping. And the act of writing is partially the act of solving. So I'm not going to be the biggest fanboy of applying that. And having said that, that's just my personal practice. Yeah. But what I'm running is an agency that's doing the opposite, and that is that we're in a time when there's two massive forces. One of them is that people's attention is becoming fragmented, and in our industry, the communications industry, as a result of that, we are defragmenting, our clients are defragmenting their relationships with agencies. So a lot of small agencies are being purchased or integrated or going out of business, and we are getting into more end-to-end solutions. So this, as I mentioned earlier, this Mercedes-Benz appointment earlier this year wasn't to be their creative agency or their data agency or their CRM agency. It was to be their agency, to be their partner to solve business problems. And so that you don't have a PR company that thinks the solution to everything is an event. My job is to solve agnostically their challenges that they face as a business with whatever of the arsenal of things that the group has. And we're going to see that more and more. So there's going to be a real consolidation of effort around solving clients' problems at the highest order possible to help transform their businesses. So, and to do that, we're applying technology at a dramatic pace. Machine learning is replacing a number of roles, and meaning upskilling is needed. Data is informing. It will never be creative, but it's informing creativity more than ever before. And automation in production and dissemination of what we do is going very, very quickly. So it's a fascinating time. But me personally, I'm a low-tech traveler that writes things down.
Love it.
And yeah.
So what does that mean in terms of, those are your personal habits, but in terms of like leading people in this age, as it were, and it's still, we're still all human beings at the end of the day, what's the secret of your success, as it were?
Knowing my weaknesses and staffing around them. It's funny. It's this time of year is the time we do 360-degree conversations. So I've had a couple this week when I was in Germany. I've got some this afternoon here in London to look at all the feedback on my direct reports, and I have too many direct reports. I've got 42 at the moment, which is too many.
That's a crazy number.
It is too many, but my boss has more, so I can't complain.
Okay.
But that's the ambiguity. That's are they really direct reports, or do we form teams and let people get on with things? But just to go through some of these things where people start reacting to performing really well on this dimension, but they're worried about this one. It's like, if you perform well on every dimension, I don't need you. I don't need the mediocrity of perfectly balanced people. The fact that you outperform in that dimension, a strength is defined by the weakness. A superhero is only a superhero because it has an arch villain with the opposite skills. That defines them as superheroes. So I know my skills. I also know my weaknesses, and I've staffed around me to make up for that. So 1 + 1 = 3. So, and because of that, and because I have the position I have, I get to pick the best of the talent in the group, particularly on this Mercedes-Benz assignment. And my leadership team is phenomenal. It's a team of 9 of us. We have 7 nationalities, 5 women out of 9. And they are the best in each respective capacity that they do, and I am thoroughly enjoying working with them. We're based in 4 cities between the 9 of us, so we're not like we turn up to work and say hi each day. But we're bound together by a common journey to have got here, because we're the 9 people that won the business. We're bound together by common objectives because we know what each other's responsible for, and we hold each other to account. We physically spend time together. We physically spend time together 4 hours a month, definite, and maybe 1 or 2 hours here and there if something comes up. But we've taken geography out of the equation of being a high-performing team so far. And it's my job to make that remoteness work, because a hallmark of our future will be to not be turning up to these offices. We're going to have a liberated, distributed, global team of people that are drawn together around projects no matter where they are in the world based on their skills and interests. And then disbanded again when the project's done, and rebanded over something else. So it's all part of that same effort that I'm making to disrupt the norms of the hierarchies and the role descriptions and the jobs that this industry has massive legacy problems with.
What I'm hearing there is everyone, I love what you said about staffing around your weaknesses, as it were, but if you know your weaknesses, you know what your superpowers are as well. So what are your superpowers, and how do you deploy them?
I have, it's funny, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have said my superpower, I only had one superpower, and that was diligence. I simply worked harder than anyone else. I remember the 26-year-old me wore a T-shirt to work once, and thankfully no one does it here to me, because I'd hate to be the other side of this T-shirt. And the T-shirt said on it, younger, faster, stronger, and I practice while you sleep. I mean, what kind of person puts that on a T-shirt and then goes to work? It's fine to act like that, but don't say it. Anyway, so I would have said diligence, but now, given that I'm getting on in age, I think there's 3 things. The first one is mental toughness, and that is the ability to maintain resilience in the face of perpetual challenges, because they're not going away. So the mental toughness to push through on these things and to bring people with you. The second one would be, like we discussed earlier, embracing ambiguity. That it is a positive thing to not know exactly where things fit and what the answer is, that we have to embrace it and build the plane on the way down the cliff. And probably the third thing would be simplifying complexity. We work in very complex systems. We solve very complex problems. And the ability to enroll a client and our team in solving them means making it consumable, making the problem consumable, making the solution consumable and repeatable. And so I do focus on the simple expression of complex things, and I think they're my 3 strengths. Now, each of those has an opposing force, and that's what I staff against, to make sure that that someone is bringing the rigor, that someone is holding my belt as I lean out the window to make sure I don't fall to the street below, and that's how we make it work.
And would you say those strengths for you are innate, or are they skills that you've developed?
Two of them are innate. I think that the one that I've had to develop was the ambiguity one, because I was actually trained to be the opposite for a while. So in corporate world, particularly in an American company, and Coke for a decade, ambiguity is not friendly. I mean, there's no space for that. It's process and rigor, and so I had to train myself out of that particular one in order to do well on this side of the fence. But the other two, I think I was very lucky to have a great education in a great egalitarian place like Australia, and I think that helped those muscles.
Looking back over your career, 20 years there or thereabouts, what's been the greatest challenge you've had to face, and how did you overcome it?
The greatest challenge was what we spoke about earlier in China. That was the greatest challenge because there was actually, the stakes were higher. Mm-hmm. The stakes were higher because I'd moved my family I had 3 little kids. They were aged, at the time, 4, 6, and 8. Yeah. And I'd moved them from London to Shanghai. So it wasn't simply about whether I'd do well in this new company, but what have I done? I've raised the stakes. I've moved my family. We've changed them out of lovely schools here in London, moved my wife to start a life in a place that was trying to reject me, and a culture that didn't know they needed what I do well until we had to work out where it all fits. Right. So that was the greatest, both personal and professional challenge. And it was tough times. It was not like happy story the whole time, but there was an arc. There was arc 1, arc 2, and arc 3, and I'm glad arc 2 and arc 3 happened. But I can also understand how a lot of people don't make it through that. So I when I look back, the harder you work, the luckier you get. But I did have a bit of luck, but it was tough times to push through. But that was definitely the worst, and therefore in hindsight the richest part, because of how much it improved me.
It's amazing what is rich in hindsight, isn't it?
Yes, it's the same way we look back and remember how wonderful every single one of our holidays were, but at the time you remember quite clearly the frustrations of everything else that goes on with them.
I think it was actually the Swedish philosopher Kierkegaard who said something along the lines of, this is the paraphrase of, we live life forwards but we understand it backwards. And I think, that's very much the case. So just talking about family then, because you said earlier you're on the road 80% of the time, and a lot of our listeners are, founders or entrepreneurs, or, they're out doing their own thing, and life is busy. How do you, I hesitate to use the word balance, because I don't think there's such a thing as balance, but how do you integrate your family life and your personal life with a hectic work schedule?
Yeah, I think for me, and this has been something I've really had to work on in the last 2 or 3 years in particular, as my work travel has increased, is when I'm home, I'm present. And I think that people confuse the amount of time that you're with your family, that is what makes you a better father or a better husband. But I believe that the presence and quality of the time you spend is far more important. I am home every single weekend. And when I'm home, I work when everyone's asleep. And when I'm awake, I'm doing stuff with my family, even if it's ferrying the kids around and being the taxi as you are on the weekends. But I'm present. And therefore, it's easy for me to say, but I regard myself as a better dad for that presence than simply for being the person that sleeps in the same house as them every single other night. I'm very lucky because I have a wife that runs the family. She's the boss, and we know what that means. I do my job. She does her job, and makes all of this possible. And the simple equation for me, and it might oversimplify things, going back to my earlier point, is that satisfaction is performance minus expectations. And I manage expectations particularly low, and the expectations are that I go somewhere to work on Monday morning, I get home from somewhere on Friday night, and if there's a bonus night, like last night I was home on a Thursday night, which is a bonus, that improves satisfaction. But if I'd be in trouble not if I traveled more. I'd be in trouble if I wasn't present when I'm home.
Yeah.
And that's really what I focus on.
So in the middle of all of this, given how crazy busy your schedule is and you've got family at the weekend, how do you take care of yourself?
Not well enough. And that's the genuine answer. If there's an area of my life that it was my birthday last week, and it was an area of my life to reflect upon for the year ahead, is improving my vitality levels and health levels. I have not had the right balance for myself in the past year in particular. The challenges have been greater, so the work has been greater. And it's not that it's all been fun. It's been busy fun. But sometimes, you just got to stop and sharpen the saw. And I need to make some personal vitality improvements, make time for exercise, make time for being outside, and just make a little bit of time for getting that balance back. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm a poster child for that kind of balance quite yet. But maybe next time we talk.
Well, I think, to be honest, I think that's really useful and valuable to kind of people listening to this, though, because, I think so many of us struggle with that kind of literally keeping all the balls in the air kind of thing. So as you're looking forwards, thinking about kind of health, vitality and that kind of thing, what kind of things do you have in mind that you're going to try and integrate and bring those into what is already a very busy life?
Sleep is one of them.
Right.
It's fascinating. I mean, sleep seems to be one of the topics of this year.
Totally.
So much more knowledge coming out of that area. It's incredible that we know so little about the thing we're supposed to spend a third of our lives doing.
Absolutely.
And it's something that I've never prioritized. It's something, thankfully, that I'm
right there with you.
I haven't felt a physical need for, but I don't know how much of that's conditioned need and how much that is real. So I think the simple act of being more disciplined about sleeping is probably one of my first steps. Then it's about nutrition. And balancing that. And frankly, I don't think the solutions are that complicated. The solution is much more a mental discipline. And if I sit down and relish solving a client's problem or relish solving our agency's problem, I need to change my attitude to solving my vitality problem.
Right.
And make it interesting. And if I can make it interesting and really enjoy that just as much, I'm sure I'll solve it quite quickly. But I don't think it's much more complex. Sleep more, eat better, and compartmentalize the stress. And if I can do those things, I think I'm going to be in a much better place pretty quickly. Well,
I look forward to seeing you this time next year and seeing where we're at. Obviously, you're in a role where a lot of people look up to you now, but we all have our people that we've looked up to in the past. Who are some of your Maverick heroes and why?
People I even gravitate towards today. So a big one today is Demis Hassabis, the guy who runs AlphaGo. The AI company that was acquired by Google. He's fascinating because hyper intelligent, clearly, but his ability to make populist, very, very complex things, and to be someone in that industry that I actually trust to applying the ethics of what is undoubtedly going to be a part of our world that is going to be ethically challenged, I think is absolutely fascinating. I really hope that he and they continue to do well inside the enormous organization that is Google.
Right.
But it seems like they're getting the right balance. Kara Swisher is someone I'm spending a lot of time listening to, the Recode Decode reporter, now writing for the New York Times again, because I think she's interesting because of the job she has right now in holding some of these Silicon Valley platforms to account. She's a very strong voice in that, and I think she's striking the right tone, and I'm enjoying the constructive approach in what's become quite a polar debate.
I love her.
Just what a brain.
What
a brain. Ed Catmull, who's the technology lead at Pixar.
Okay.
He's the third person that people don't talk about that built that thing, but he's the one I quite like the most. So John Lasseter was always the storyteller, Steve Jobs was the sponsor, but he was the guy that worked out how you use technology to serve creativity. And he's still there. He's still there as president of animation. So I think he's another good Maverick disrupting things. And there's a long list, but they're 3 examples.
That's three great examples as well, and 3 people that not many people would have at the top of their list.
Look them all up. They've all got at least podcasts, at least TED Talks, and some of them even have a book.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
But they're worth gravitating.
And I'm right there with you on Cara Swisher. I think she's amazing. So that was Heroes. What kind of stuff do you fill up on inspiration-wise when it comes to, I don't know, culture, media, film, music, whatever?
First of all, it would be a book before anything else.
Right.
Physical books still.
Yeah. So what are you reading right now?
I'm reading a book on flavour. Literally, the book is called Flavour, and it is on the science of how the sense works, and the science of making new things that appeal to that sense. And if you looked at the book beside the stack of books beside my bed, you'd find there 80% weird non-fiction topics like that. There's a book there on oysters. There's a book there on the colour blue and where it came from.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that.
I get interested in going really deep on things that aren't part of my direct life, but that you find yourself drawing upon. I'll be referring to something about flavour at some point in the future, because you just take time to detach and understand something new. So I'm a consumer of diverse non-fiction stuff, and then probably military history would probably be the second biggest topic. So it's just that's what stimulates me.
Brilliant.
And Star Wars.
Well, you can't knock Star Wars,
and
can
Lego.
you?
But Lego, Star Wars and books, how's that?
Absolutely. Lego's like a huge thing. I coach a couple of CEOs who both, I mean, there's one I coach who literally, behind him in his office is like 500,000 Legos, I'm sure.
I do make my birthdays very easy for my children. Last weekend I got Boba Fett Lego, a Boba Fett cutout, a Boba Fett cake, a new Star Wars pajamas. I do make it quite easy for them, so it's nice to be interested.
And I'm sure at some point they'll probably look to nick those from your office or whatever. Brilliant. Last couple of questions. If you had a piece of advice to give to a Maverick starting out, whatever, whether it was entrepreneurial or whatever, what piece of advice would you give them?
I would say you are not an imposter. And which is another topic which I've thought about for many years and understood the imposter syndrome. I've caught myself feeling like an imposter at various points because I've often had teams of people that have been more experienced and older than me working for me in different companies. I have progressed a little faster than others in the various jobs that I've done, and a natural questioning is the imposter syndrome of, am I a fraud? Am I just really good at these things, which is telling stories and expressing things, and will it all catch up with me? But I really now believe it withholds a lot of people from really pursuing what they can pursue. That people think there's a chronological order to how you're meant to move up and through the world, and there isn't. You can disrupt that order massively, and we see that in the platforms and the tech startups and people just changing what should be expected of you at your age. So I would say to anyone, assume you are not an imposter, because that is a question that holds people back more than it should.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. I think there was a stat as well, I think it might have been in HBR or something like that, about 75% of the jobs that kids who are at school today will do when they're growing up don't currently exist. So, I mean...
So I'm involved in my son goes to a great school here in London. I was there with the headmaster recently, and he gave a wonderful speech, which gave me a lot of confidence about the education my son's getting. And the nub of it was, he said, listen, we've been sent a letter. So normally there's movies where the aliens give us about an hour's notice before they come to Earth, and then they blow up all the famous landmarks, and eventually Will Smith saves us.
Yeah.
But he said, we're in the middle of an alien invasion. But unlike an alien invasion that's coming tomorrow, the aliens have sent us a letter, and it says, Dear Earth, we're coming. Just so you know, we're smarter than you, we're replicable, we're lower cost, we work harder than you. We're coming, and we're going to destroy everything you know. We'll be there in about 10 years, so we're giving you time to do something about it, but just so you know, we're coming. And he said this is exactly how we should look at AI and how we should look at machine learning and the fact that those jobs don't exist. And he says, so if that is true and it's 10 years, and really probably it's about 5 years, I've got a bunch of 12-year-old boys for whom I need to give them the ability to critically solve problems, to be creative in the way they work, because the actual things they know won't be as relevant in that short period of time because the aliens are coming. So I just thought it was a very powerful metaphor for what we're dealing with. Yeah. I have no idea what my children will do. We'll see.
That's the joy of this age, isn't it? Finally, what's next for Justin Billingsley?
I'm really enjoying what I'm doing now. What's next is to spend the next year making this new agency called Publicis EMIL, doing all of Daimler's work in 40 countries, the best bleeding edge example of what our industry needs to become. And then I imagine my next job will be to work out how that scales into everything else that we do. So right now it's still very much in an incubator mode. I've got the best talent, the best technology, and I'm kind of protecting them from the world while we get this working. And when it's working, the job is to scale it. So if it's up to me, and at this stage it is up to me, I pretty much know what I'll be doing, the kind of work I'll be doing for the next few years, and I can't wait.
So this was Mavericks Radio. Thanks to Justin Billingsley for being my guest today and for sharing his insights on what it is to be a real maverick in big business. Keep listening for our next episode, subscribe and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other people to find us. And with that, I'll see you next time, and bye for now.